I'm Charlotte McLeod with investingnews.com, and here today with me is Steve Anders. He is executive chairman at Brooks & Nelson and professor emeritus at the Colorado School of Mines. Thank you so much for being here. Great to have you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Really good to be speaking with you for the first time. And I thought, since it is our first time talking, if you wouldn't mind beginning with a little bit of background information on yourself, your work in the mining sector, what you're doing right now.
Thank you. I've been in the mining business now for 50 years. Mining mineral exploration, about half in copper, half in gold, half in mining operations and major projects, and half in mineral exploration, all mixed up over my career. Probably some of my notable positions, I was head of worldwide exploration for Phelps Dodge, which was absorbed by Freeport, in copper, and then head of worldwide exploration for Newmont, back to back. And in the latter part of my career, I became involved in a private equity company, which was quite successful. I ended up becoming executive chairman of the board of a company called Uranium Minerals, which is now Elemental Royalty Corp. And I've been teaching and a department head at the Colorado School of Mines for the last 15 years in mining engineering and geology and geological engineering.
Well, hopefully we'll get into some topics that relate to your background there. I thought, beginning with a broad question, if you could share where you see us right now in the commodities cycle.
You know, I've given that some thought, and I have to put a caveat out there that I don't really know, but I can tell you my sense is that so long as we have population growth, and that the bulk of that population growth is in developing countries that want more than what they already have, we're going to see the fundamentals for metals always be growing over time. I think if I want to look at it in terms of sectors, I think gold always has a good investment thesis. I think the gold bugs have already had their day, even though they don't believe it. Certainly, you know, with what's happened with gold price in the last year or so. I'm a huge bull on copper long term, but these are long term projects. I'm keen on uranium because I think the world is going to end up needing nuclear power more than they think, particularly with the advent of data centers and the use of energy for that. And then I think silver has a pretty good investment thesis too. But in the end, we're going to see cycles, and you're just going to have to play it out. But I think long term, so long as we have a growing population, we're going to have a demand for metals.
Well, we'll pick up on some of the points you mentioned there. One thing that I want to draw out right now, so you mentioned gold has maybe had its day in the sun, but silver thesis still looking good. Can you expand on those ideas?
So I'm an expert. I'm not an expert on silver, but I know that we're just undersupplied right now relative to demand, and I think last I heard it was like 6 years of in a row of being undersupplied, right? And so to me, there's that thinking, and silver has a lot of industrial applications as well, which makes it different than gold.
So you mentioned as long as the population is growing, we're going to have demand for these metals. With that in mind, how healthy is the exploration sector right now? I know when we have these runs in the price of metals like gold, usually the juniors can get some attention, raise some money, but how are they looking right now?
So mineral exploration has some really interesting trends. One of the I guess most concerning is certainly over the last 20 years, we've seen a decline in the percent of worldwide explorations going into grassroots or greenfield exploration. So the question is, where are the new discoveries going to come from? That's a big issue. At the same time, most of the money is going into advancing projects that have already been discovered or enlarging deposits that have already been mining for years and years and renewing, obviously, the changes in the metal prices have made low-grade material now considered high-grade, and it renews those districts over time. So that's some of the big trends I see.
Yeah, that sounds like a major challenge. So where will those new discoveries come from? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I'm keen on new discoveries in old districts.
Okay.
I am. And it's not just because of metal prices, but it could be because of changes in technology, but it's also because a lot of these things cluster, even whether it's copper or whether it's gold, the types of deposits tend to cluster, and you can almost always find more. And so I think they're going to come from there. They're going to come from frontier areas. They're going to come from places where people actually don't want to be geopolitically. But I think in the end, the favorable belts around the world that we already know about are going to continue to give up new discoveries.
So new discoveries from old jurisdictions, these would be places that people, whether they've been mined before, now they've been set aside, and we should think about coming back to them?
That's one way to think about it, but
Okay.
there's just new ideas in old districts,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So it could be brand new discovery where the paradigm used to be one thing and now someone's challenging it and finding something new because they've thought about it differently.
Right, right. So we're talking about how we need to have more discoveries. I know you've also spoken out there about elsewhere about how there are too many juniors out there and we need to see a reduction. So how could that happen realistically?
So, I don't know if it will happen,
Right.
but my view is that despite the fact that we have high metal prices, or because of it, everyone's projects look like they're in the money, but it doesn't mean that they're good projects, okay? And so, to me, I think there's still a lot of money chasing marginal opportunities, and if there were, let's just say, fewer companies, and there was more focus on the better opportunities, it might be more efficient, but I don't have a lot of confidence that our market will do that.
Yeah, I guess it hasn't happened so far, but that goes in a good direction. I wanted to talk a little bit about the due diligence process when it comes to juniors. So when you're looking at them, what are the most important boxes that you want to check?
People.
People.
It's really all about the people. Investments, research that I've done has shown that investments in the mining space, when they fail, it's because of people, not because of the reserves in the ground or the costs or something else. And so the first thing you have to look at are who are the people in the company. So when I look at a junior company's webpage, I'll look at it and I'll go, who's on the board? Who is management? Do I know them? If I don't know them, what's their background? Does it fit with the stage of the business that they're in? So if it's a bunch of lawyers running an exploration company, I'm concerned. If it's a bunch of geologists trying to develop a big mining operation and they don't have any experience doing that, I get concerned. So I'm looking for the balance of expertise and experience at the board and the management, and then I look at their track record.
So people is number one on the good side. I was going to ask about red flags as well. I guess a red flag is if they don't have the right type of people, but anything else you would want to highlight?
Sure. Where are they working in the world? Well, what's the geopolitical jurisdiction? How does that fit with, their business thesis? So, for example, I use Haiti as an example. I worked in Haiti with both Eurasian Minerals and then with Newmont. And it's a basket case of a country to work in, and you can't work there now. But when we were there, our investment thesis is we needed to find something big and high grade to justify dealing with the political risk there. But I could go to Nevada and find something smaller and lower grade, and I'm just as happy because the challenges are entirely different where you have existing infrastructure and good rule of law.
On the note of infrastructure, or sorry, jurisdiction, you had mentioned we need to start looking at frontier jurisdictions. Are there any up and coming ones that you think people should pay attention to?
Once upon a time, we used to think that British Columbia and the Yukon were kind of tough places, right? And now we're seeing a lot of discoveries there. When I was with they changed their name to EMX Royalty Corp. We had a project in Far East Russia that everyone thought was crazy to be there, but it worked out quite successfully, and we ended up selling a big copper project to a Russian company and moved on. I think that we can't manage the geological prospectivity in the Earth's crust, but we can manage geopolitical risks smartly if we can. So I think we have to be balancing those.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear about. I think of BC and the Yukon as good mining jurisdictions right now. So interesting to hear that background. I want to ask also about the level of investor interest in the resource space right now. So I think exploration, that's risky, and people have a lot of choices right now where they can go if they want to do risky investments. So what do you think it would take to bring more people here as opposed to in crypto or AI or things like that?
I think we're seeing it already. And I can give you an example parallel to that at the university. So at the Colorado School of Mines, when I was a department head there, we had 80 undergraduate students declared mining engineering as a discipline. Today it's 200. And it's because after the last few years, and I would directly relate it to Trump's ascension to president, where he talks about critical minerals and rare earths and everything all the time. I mean, it's in the news every day, right? It's in the news every day. And so now, at least at the School of Mines, the cool kids want to study mining engineering, okay? And so I think that the narrative in the press worldwide, particularly in this country, has changed people's understanding of the importance of metals, and I think that'll bring more investors in.
All right. Yeah, I was wondering about investors, but that's also bringing new people into the industry, which I know some people have talked about as a problem as the people working age. So we do have that new contingent of people coming in to work as well.
Right, we do, but we're highly leveraged, okay? So in the United States, we graduate something like 200 mining engineering students a year, and our demand is 400 to maybe 600. That's not very many people. It's just not very many people. And when you look around the world, our entire built world has been made on the backs of metals and minerals that have had to be mined at some point, and we built our entire world with very few people actually in that business.
Really interesting. I want to make sure that we talk about your topic here at the Rural Symposium as well, which is prospect generation for copper deposits. I thought that's interesting because for copper, I tend to hear that the easy deposits have already been found. So would you say that's true?
So we always say that's true, right? We always say that's true. So it's a challenge for me to talk about those two topics at the same time because I think the prospect generation model was built on the back of gold exploration because it has a much lower barrier to entry. A lower capital cost to build it, lower cost to explore and discover it. Copper is a whole nother business, and I think it's difficult for the junior companies to compete. I think there's a place for them, but it's in the initial target generation, identification of the prospect, making it look as good as they can to see if a larger company might be interested in it. But it's not like a gold explorer, which actually could go in and actually irrationally actually put in production if they wanted to, but they could. Copper is very, very difficult.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there are any special considerations for explorers that are out looking for copper. It sounds like there are, and maybe the prospect generator model will work better for getting those new discoveries out there.
Depends on the kind of deposit and where it's located. There's a type of deposit called a volcanogenic massive sulfide deposit. Think about it as massive sulfides. They're smaller, they're higher grade, much better for a smaller company. If you're looking for a porphyry copper deposit, which are the biggest in the world, they're huge, and they're generally lower grade, it's really hard for a small company to actually put enough money in the ground to advance those without a major partner.
Yeah, that definitely does seem to be a challenge. I wonder if we can talk a little bit more about your outlook for copper. So you mentioned you're bullish, and I often hear really good long-term things about copper, whereas in the immediate term, people wonder, well, maybe we have a recession and economic pullback, and that hurts the copper market. So how do you see it?
So I think that copper price is still not high enough to incent the development of brand new projects that really are out there and I'm going to say ready to go, but not entirely right. I'm bullish long term. I'm also intrigued by all of the work that's being done in different companies around the world and research institutes around how to get more of the lower grade primary ore to become economic. And if that happens, it might renew a lot of the existing deposits around the world and then open up new exploration space for new discoveries of that lower grade material. So that's always a potential that might happen out there. But again, it's the demand and it's based on economic growth and development and so on. So it's hard to say, but I'm a bull on it because I think the major factors, fundamentals are there.
For those lower grade deposits to become economic, would that be we get higher prices or we get new technology that helps? Okay.
I think new technology makes all the difference in the world. Yeah. Because if we want to look at sustainability, we want to get more of the copper out of the ground than mine more rock that has low grade copper where we don't get much out, right? So I think we have to think about sustainability too.
And any thoughts on that potential incentive price that might help more newer projects get off the ground?
No, higher than it is
Higher
now.
than it is.
Each project has its own economics, right? So it's hard to say.
Yeah, that's hard to make a blanket statement about that. I wonder just a little bit more on the copper supply demand situation. I hear all these statistics like we need 60 new copper mines globally by 2030 to meet demand, and that kind of just sounds impossible. So
It is.
yeah,
I think it is. I have some colleagues who published a paper recently, and I'll talk about it this afternoon, that it's just impossible to achieve the projected demand with what we have in the pipeline now, and it will take decades to get to there, and we don't know what's happening to the demand going forward in decades. So it's a difficult thing. And so that means we're going to need very, very big projects, and a lot of those big projects. So how is the market going to react to that? I heard this week that some companies are now looking at substituting aluminum for copper because the copper price is so high. I don't think it's about price. I think eventually it might be about supply. So we're going to look for different ways to be more efficient with our use of copper or find alternatives if we can't find enough and develop it because it takes so long.
that's interesting. I hadn't heard that before. Pay attention to that one. I also was going to bring up the AI angle because that's adding to copper demand, or at least people think that it will. How significant do you think that might end up being?
That's an interesting question. It's fashionable now for companies to want to use AI to help them with targeting, which I think is an interesting place to be using it, but it doesn't really change the entire process cycle, the whole cycle of discovery development. So I think there's some challenges with how much AI can do, but I have a colleague, his name's Tim Snyder. He was head of operations for Phelps Dodge when I was there, and he firmly believes that AI is going to be able to find new ways to be more efficient, and we don't think about it that way. We're always thinking about supply, but on the other end, it might be that there's something out there that we can't determine now that might surprise us and help us solve issues that we can't see today.
Yeah, it seems like it could go either way. And, you mentioned the students. I'm going to go back to that for a moment. Are you seeing student interest in using AI to solve mining problems right now?
There's some applications for it.
Yeah.
I think students have to know about it. It's a challenge for us in education about how we deal with it from, cheating, for example. But I think it's a tool that we're going to need to use. And I just think it's still too early to tell just what impact it's really going to make.
Before I let you go, we're coming to the end, but you did mention uranium at the beginning, so I want to go in that direction for a moment as well. I wonder what points you would draw out there that make it that investors should pay attention versus, the metals side. What's particular to uranium that we should pay attention to?
I think it's about non-carbon producing energy sources. I think it's probably the most sustainable energy source out there for us. Better than solar, better than wind, and certainly better than the carbon-based. And it has a much lower footprint when you think about it. And so I'm excited by the small modular reactor technology that's out there and the microreactors that are out there. I have always said that the projects that I've been on that have been discovered in remote areas, I need a vest pocket nuclear reactor to actually provide power to them. I've always thought about taking an old submarine and bringing it up a river and then plugging in the nuclear power into that for a new mine. But there's a lot of applications for nuclear power in our parts of the world that are way beyond the need we might have in mining. So I think it's really one of the power sources of the future.
Yeah, I think many people would agree. Well, I will send you back out on the show floor unless you had any final thoughts you wanted to share on trends in the exploration industry, the mining sector, before I let you go.
Only that it's really fun.
Oh.
It's a very, very fun industry to be part of, and I'm happy to have spent the bulk of my career doing that.
Well, this was a really great conversation, I think really valuable. So thank you so much for coming on to talk.
You're very welcome. Thank you for asking me.
Of course. And once again, I'm Charlotte McLeod with investingnews.com, and this is Steve Anders.